Mhm.
Welcome into this place of peace, and let its silence heal your spirit. Come into this place of memory and let its history warm your soul. Come into this place of prophecy and power and let its vision change your heart. Those are words from a UU minister, William Schultz. Good morning, welcome members, friends, and visitors to the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River, where our mission is to inspire, inform, and support all who seek spiritual and personal growth and a more equal and just community. My name is Marilee Tausig, and this is probably not the service, if you read this week's reflections, that you thought you were going to get. Nancy Holland and Rosie Ramsey Granillo both tested positive for COVID this week. They were our service leader and our speaker. So you got potluck here, folks. It's been an interesting week. Rosie, I think most of you know, is the beloved daughter of the beloved Marcy and John. And we are absolutely sure that we're going to have her back. She is the director of the local management board, which frankly is the heart and soul of most of social justice going on. There's just hardly anything Rosie doesn't know about making this particular part of the earth a better place. And we miss her. But Annie has generously stepped in and put together this service and will be our speaker today. I will be depending more on the clipboard than normal. My husband, who is a contractor, says that if you wanted to sneak into someplace, just walk around with a clipboard and an air of confidence and you can get away with anything. So I will be a bit married to the clipboard today since everything is a little bit newer than usual. And forgive us for the lack of order of service. Order of service would have confused you more than it would have helped you. So we're just rolling with the punches. And back to this week's service for Unitarian Universalist, it is service that we call prayer. This morning, we're extending this concept of prayer to include the many ways we pray. It is that all prayer is a longing, a breath, a reprieve, a celebration, a thanksgiving, and a kind of yes to life. And that is what Annie will be presenting in her talk this morning, Knocking on Heaven's Door. Also this morning, we are very pleased to have Michael Casey at the piano. It's been a bumpy week for all of us, so have a little extra thought for the worship committee and the people who are tech and make coffee and all the volunteers and staff that pull this Sunday morning together. I'm particularly grateful for that this week. We're glad you're here. We're glad the people that are joining us by Zoom are here. We want to remind you, if you're a visitor, which I don't think you are, that you can sign our book in the lobby, or if you're on Zoom, you can donate with our donate button on the website. We have 3 announcements somewhere here in my clipboard. One social justice, one from report on last night's bread and soup supper, and which I have here somewhere in my papers, and one from MQ, who will be giving it herself, and we'll take them in that order. From the Social Justice Committee, thanks to your never-ending generosity, all the gifts for the holiday sharing family have been signed on for this year. Woo-woo. However, in lieu of an outreach collection, we are asking those who still want to contribute to consider purchasing a gift card for the family so that they can buy groceries or other personal items. Please see the board in the lobby for details, and remember that the gifts and gift cards will be due back here wrapped and labeled by next Sunday, September 17th. And if you have any more questions, feel free to ask me or Kathy or other members here who are on the Social Justice Committee. We'll be happy to, if we don't know it, we'll find it out. And Jane sent me a message. She couldn't be here today. She says, we had a house full of jolly, well-fed people who loved being at UUCR for our soup sampler supper on Friday evening. Ticket sales were good and have exceeded our fundraising goal of
Hey
$1,000.
there. We got lots of chips in the pantry. I just got your text. Got lots of chips.
As if we didn't have enough surprises.
Yeah.
Where
Well,
is
whatever. I mean, you know, you can get tortillas and avocados at the Mexican store if they're open on Sunday morning.
That's Linda Dutton.
It's someone on Zoom.
Does she know her mic is on?
Jim's gonna mute.
Oh,
Jim.
sorry.
You know, I'd like to say that Linda's always with us in spirit, but even more this week. That's just great. Where was I? Ticket sales were good. We have exceeded our fundraising goal of 1,000 or very close to it. At least 25 members and friends of UUCR were involved in making our event a success. Hats off to you all and to all of you who came out to partake of our soup, spreads, and desserts. MQ?
Morning, everyone. You are a little bit shorter than I am. I don't know if you read Reflections this week, but there was an update from me, and part of that update was the intention of the board to have the Leadership Development Committee begin a ministerial search committee. Now, you may wonder, why is that? We have our beloved Reverend Sue. Well, about 18 months ago, Sue did let people know that she was interested in perhaps going into retirement. Pardon me. And then about 6 months ago, Lynn negotiated a 1-year contract with Sue, and that was going to be all there was going to be, not another term. Pardon me. So we are looking for, we will be in the process of a search for a new minister. And if anybody is interested in helping with that search, they should definitely contact the LDC members or myself or any board member. We'd be happy to talk to you about it. This is a time that's very important for our church, and we'd like as much participation as we can. It's not like Sue's going to go away forever, and what she's doing with Easton is no concern to us. We don't really know what's going on there. It's just that she wanted to step back some time. So anybody willing to step up and help, please do. Thanks.
Since we don't have an order of service, Annie is going to lead us in the traditional words for the lighting of the chalice while I actually do the lighting.
I'm assuming you all remember the words. We had no order of service all during COVID, so we can step in here. We light this chalice as a symbol of the light within all creation. We light this chalice. May the peace be with us always. We light this chalice for all. The love of others is strong in our hearts.
Today is also the 4th day of Hanukkah, and the word derives from the Hebrew meaning to dedicate. Also known as the Festival of Lights, it commemorates the Maccabean Jews regaining control of Jerusalem and rededicating the Second Temple in the 2nd century BCE. Although there was only enough sacred oil to burn for 1 night, it miraculously burned for 8 nights, as symbolized by the 8 candles of menorah. As we all strive to bring light into the world, please rise and join with me in body or spirit as we sing hymn number 221 in the gray hymnal, Light One Candle. So our opening words help us prepare for Annie's talk. She's given them to me. It says, remember prayer. Osho, a Zen writer, says, when the mind knows, we call it knowledge. When the heart knows, we call it love. And when the being knows, we call it prayer. For some, it may still be an important part of a spiritual life, and for others, prayer may have gone by the wayside and identifies with an earlier faith tradition. Today, in some UU churches, the word prayer is rarely mentioned, while in others it's practiced with frequency. And as the years pass and we continue to search for truth and meaning, as we find ourselves re-examining, maybe realigning more with the awe and wonder of existence, it may be a surprise to discover that there is a place for prayer in our lives. It might be a very different prayer than it was years ago, to a different understanding of God and from a very different personality that you are today. Maybe it's time to take a second look at the practice, which continues to bring comfort and peace for many. Perhaps this time around, you might find it works a little differently than it did before, maybe even better, and it might be time to give prayer a second chance. And quoting, it was the custom of voyagers, those hardy canoemen of the 17th century paddling through the waters of the Canadian wilderness, to pray often, at the beginning of a hazardous day, at its safe conclusion, and on the journey itself. Each made his supplication, but it was never for himself. It was for the man who sat beside him in the canoe, or behind him, or before him. Free to devote himself to others, the voyager also knew that there was always someone who would be praying for his safety. In our time for reflection, it is a poem from Anne Sexton, who just so happened to have been my mother's favorite poet, Annie. Annie found this for us. Welcome, morning. There is joy in all, in the cannon towel newly washed that I rub my body with each morning, in the chapel of eggs that I cook each morning, in the outcry from the kettle that heats my coffee each morning, in the spoon and the chair that cry, hello there, Anne, each morning, in the Godhead of the table that I set my silver plate and cup upon each morning. All this is God, right here in my pea greenhouse each morning. And I mean, though often forget, to give thanks, to faint down by the kitchen table in a prayer of rejoicing as the holy birds at the kitchen window peck into their marriage of seeds. I'm just going to give a little editorial comment. Chapel of eggs and marriage of seeds. Poets. So while I think of it, let me paint a thank you on my palm for this God, this laughter of the morning, lest it go unspoken. The joy that is not shared, I've heard, dies young. For just a few moments, I invite you to sit with these words and reflect on what you love most, where the joy is in your life, and what your prayer of gratitude might be. This is the time that we share our joys and concerns, sorrows, lived experiences, all the things that we feel supported because we can come and share it with our community. So if you want to come, and I'll adjust the mic and share for us up here with your joy and concern. And I will start. I'll be happy to light a candle for you, but I will start because about 10 days ago, we got the best Christmas present a parent can ever get. My daughter got the job of her dreams, doing a creative thing she loves to do with a living wage for a cause she believes in. That's winning the lottery if you're a parent.
Use the microphone, please. There's one on the side.
You spoke of this being a rocky week, almost in the same breath, or right after you thanked Michael for being here for us. I simply wanted to say that Michael did not have a rocky week. He sang a beautiful solo last night, and it just adds to what we know about his many talents.
I'm a poor substitute for my daughter, I know. But I just want to let you know, she is feeling fairly sick, but we're sure she'll come back. She's basically surviving on chicken noodle soup thoughtfully provided by Freddie from the Acme, and she might not want any more chicken noodle soup for a while, but she'll be back.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I was just sitting in the back row over there, and who comes to sit next to me? But Kevin is back and sitting right there, and it's wonderful to have you back, Kevin. We're all glad to see you.
For all the concerns that we've shared and the ones that we hold in our hearts, let us take another moment of silence. With our offertory, we show how we care for each other here. Let us also care for this church, for its mission and programs by giving as you can, for we are now the keepers of the flame.
Mama, take this badge off me. I can't use it anymore. It's getting too dark to see. I'm feeling I'm knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, 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 knocking on heaven's door. Mama, I put my guns in the ground. I can't shoot them anymore. That long black cloud is coming down. I feel I'm knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, 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 knocking on heaven's door. Ooh, ooh.
Good morning. Well, good morning to you all. And thank you, Michael, for my very last minute, 11th hour request for knocking on heaven's door as an introduction to my talk today. Some of those lyrics. Take this badge from me, I can't use it anymore. It's getting dark, too dark to see. Feels like I'm knocking on heaven's door. Put my guns in the ground, I can't shoot them anymore. That cold black cloud is coming down. Feels like I'm knocking on heaven's door. Do those lyrics from 50 plus years ago of knocking on heaven's door ring a bell? Bob Dylan wrote that song in 1973, which for so many others, they picked it up, including the Beatles and Pink Floyd, even Guns N' Roses. But it was Eric Clapton's soulful rendition that best captured for me the heart's longing and hope in times of passage. And the 70s and 80s were indeed times of passage for many of us whose young lives were beset with Vietnam, death and loss, disillusionment and rebellion. Remember rebellion? Choosing colleges and career choices, and decisions that would indeed shape our entire lives. These lyrics spoke to me, and from its popularity, apparently many others, for despite our 20-year-old swagger and pseudo-confidence, we knew where to turn when the going got rough. And for many, that was at heaven's door. Whatever we may have called it, this knocking, this hoping, this needing help and asking for it probably boiled down to the word prayer. And that may have been what helped us weather the lesser crises in life as well, such as finding car keys and maybe finding the screaming baby's pacifier, that would be St. Anthony, or jump-starting stalled creativity when important deadline zoomed, that might be St. Jude. He was for the impossible, or to the even more serious, such as boarding a ship bound for Korea, or a plane for Vietnam, or racing with a dying child to the ER. I know that prayer came easy to me in those days because of my religious schooling and experience, and looking back on it, I'm awfully glad. In the ensuing years, I've changed, many of us have changed, as we have grown into the fullness of our days and our beliefs, while continuing always to stay open, to rethink, rework our beliefs, and all that gives life meaning. I still pray, but now it's a different prayer and to a different understanding of God and from a different me than it was years ago. Perhaps it's the same for you, and we're simply using different language. But how would we know? Because there are words that many of us use tiptoe around, and prayer is one. For some, it speaks of a different time and a religious practice that isn't always a happy memory. But I thought today we might put that aside and take a look at the word prayer and see what it conjures, see how you define it at this time in your life. As you know, we Unitarian Universalists have a wide range of beliefs about God and the nature of the ultimate, as well as about prayer. I'm sure some of us never pray. Others have a regular prayer life, and most of us fall somewhere in between. I think we can all agree that as humans, we search and we quest. Joseph Campbell, the American writer who authored Power of the Myth, describes this human quest for a religious or spiritual life this way. He said, "We're all sitting on the back of a whale, fishing for minnows. the size of our question, and often its answer, is always so much smaller than the majesty of existence. Emerson, our UU forefather, says, "It's not what we believe, but the universal impulse to believe that is the principal fact." For me, it doesn't matter whether one believes in God. I feel though we all stand in awe before the grandeur and the wonder of life and the mystery of our existence. And for many, this does matter, and possibly is our common ground, what we honor when we gather here on a Sunday morning. And this aligning of hearts and minds to this ultimate and each other is, for me, a prayer. In visiting UU churches, it surprised me that the word prayer is often heard in some and practiced both aloud and silently in many. In other UU churches, it's a word rarely mentioned. Here at UUCR, we don't hear it too often. Perhaps we're sensitive to offending someone, or maybe we feel it's hard to pray together when we do not always agree to whom or what we might be praying. But is it? Most of us have traveled the circuitous route of life to become UUs. We have come out of a more orthodox or a conventional religious background. We might have felt along the way that we had grown beyond many of our previous beliefs, including the traditional image of God as the interventionist, the God, the great Father in the sky. That God who heard and answered prayers. This was the God many of us grew up with, wasn't it? And in time, the one we might have begun to question, and maybe even with a lot of pain, reject. This idea of a God who, in answering prayers, helped one sports team to accumulate more points on the field, who made the sunshine for someone's outdoor event, despite it being drought for the neighboring farms, who bypassed a specific house when a tornado came and leveled the one next door. This in itself would challenge the practice of prayer in many of our lives. So we may have turned to a more liberal church like this one, in which we could explore and more honestly divide our sense of the spiritual without nuances of past religions. But as we moved into the 21st century and beyond, we are learning from UUA that those members now joining our churches, perhaps the person sitting next to you, comes without a lot of religious sensitivities, associations, baggage, if you will, from the past. They come wanting to know more about religion and to develop a spiritual and religious life. They're not turned off by traditional words like prayer to give expression to their personal quest and practices. They may not believe in an omnipresent, omniscient father figure, but that's not where they stop. It's where they begin. UUA is telling me, and you, us, as did UUCR survey some years ago, that many are comfortable with and want certain traditions, especially the opportunity to join minds and hearts with others during service. And what are some choosing to call it? You guessed it, prayer. This is what we do during acknowledgments of the heart, when we end our sharing with a moment of meditation or silence or prayer. It takes the sting out of a word that for many of us has a limited connotation, reflecting an earlier religious tradition, when it really stands for so much more. Let's take a closer look at this word, such a simple little word, and it wields so much power, and note its different forms and how it's used. First, is it possible to have a humanist prayer? Can atheists as well pray? David Maynard, a well-known minister, a humanist minister, was asked without prior knowledge to offer the prayer before a banquet that was attended by a room full of interfaith ministers. The minister telling the story said he kind of held his breath for just a second, but David Maynard did not hesitate for a second. He just launched right in with it. "Oh, to all of life," he said, "we are thankful." He proceeded to thank every part of what had contributed to their being there that day, to eat together. He thanked the chickens and the vegetables, the cooks and the cars, the postal service and the planning team for the meeting. He gave thanks for that moment and ended it with, "This is our prayer. Amen." Another well-known UU minister and a humanist, Paul Beatty, shared that he does not pray to something or someone. He simply opens his heart and mind, sitting quietly, and finds renewal and even inspiration. He does not attribute the source of his comfort or inspiration. He simply is grateful for what comes to him. He was the editor of the Religious Humanist magazine for many years. And on the internet, I found a number of atheist prayers that you might want to check out. They're quite beautiful. So yes, humanists and atheists and so many others can pray, and they do. There are many different ways that we pray. First, there is the prayer of petition. That's still my default when things get rough. When one UU minister calls, it's the gimme prayer. This is the prayer for asking, for pleading, depending on how desperate you are, to which I think we're all familiar. It is said about prayer in school that for as long as there are final examinations, there will always be prayer. And I think that goes for that expression about being in the foxhole. There are no atheists. Yet closer to home, we face all kinds of tests in our adult lives, and who does not at times long for a moment of wish fulfillment? But do we really expect them to be answered? Maybe some of us do. Some would counter that that makes the image of God a cosmic vending machine or a super Santa Claus giving out gifts to those he chooses. And there's that Lily Tomlin line when she said, "Why is it when we talk to God, we are said to be praying, but when God talks to us, we're said to be schizophrenic?" I remember praying as a little girl and really believing that if I prayed hard enough, I'd get what I was asking for. And when that didn't always happen, and I wondered why God hadn't answered me, I was simply told that he had answered me. And the answer was no. As an adult and seeing prayer differently now, I was interested in UU Minister John Govern's take on this. He believes that sometimes the best prayers are the ones that go unanswered, because he feels the longing can be its own answer. The longing is the prayer. Being better in touch with that longing allows us to become more aware, to move through our distress or our desire. This clarity can be its own reward, he said, and therein for many lies peace. There's a second kind of traditional prayer, and that is the prayer of intercession. This is when we pray for the well-being and blessing of others. These are the prayers of compassion that we use for the welfare of our loved ones, our grandkids, people hurting close to home, people hurting across the world in the horrendous war zones that we see nightly on TV. I know someone who has a very sweet practice. From time to time, he takes pictures from his dusty album and spends a moment or two thinking about his relationship with certain family members, his friends, their lives, their hopes, their struggles. He doesn't get down on his knees, nor does he begin with "Our Father," but he tells me it feels a lot like the prayer of his boyhood. In part, this is the Buddha prayer. It's called metta, the prayer of loving kindness, of compassion for one person or for all living and non-living beings. These kinds of prayers do not begin with an invocation. Nothing is being addressed unless you want to. For the Buddha, whether God existed or not was not important. The hope is that we will do our best to live good lives, to be worthy of our humanity. This is not changed by having a God, many gods, or no God. The longing is a more compassionate, one for a more compassionate and good life, a life without suffering for ourselves and all men. I recently read of several ministers who, a few summers ago, traveled through Turkey at the invitation of the Institute of Interfaith Dialogue. And that's a network of progressive, moderate, and liberal Islamic leaders and students. I quote from one of their journals. He says, "We were traveling with practicing Muslims. Their religion calls for them to pray 5 times a day, but there is some leniency for illness or travel. But I soon found that if our guides and hosts and translators had not a chance to pray, they might simply say, 'We need to pray now. Will you wait or will you come back and meet us here?' Sometimes it was 15 minutes, sometimes only 5. There were times when I did go with them. I tried the full process of cleansing and the bowing. It was okay. It was their way. It wasn't mine. I tried sitting at the back and would meditate or pray. I was deeply restful and renewed. But by stopping, by slowing down, by shifting gears, it was good. It meant that the rhythm of our travel was not just about sightseeing and meetings, but was framed by prayer, by expressing gratitude to another or to no one in particular, simply an appreciation for life. Which brings me to a final form of prayer. Of all the prayers, giving thanks might be the easiest. It is simply saying yes to all there is. We can give thanks as it orients us. It reminds us that we are dependent on this world, this universe, this life, upon forces that are greater than ourselves. This life is not of our making, but we are free to choose to love it or not, to use it well or not. Each of these can be the prayer. I love the words of the 13th century Sufi poet, Rumi, who reminds us, his voice coming through the ages, that when we awake in the morning, perhaps we're feeling empty and frightened. To greet the day, take down a musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. As for us Unitarians, our service to others is considered our prayer. So as we reach out to those around the world, as well as to those here at home, I'm reminded that indeed there are hundreds of ways to pray, to kneel, and kiss the ground. So there you have it. Like everything else of importance in my life, my prayers changed. For me, it's now the contemplation of life from its highest and deepest perspective. That's simple enough. My life's passage has given me not only permission, but rather an invitation to widen my perspective on a spiritual life, knowing it will continue to grow and change as long as I'm open to it. No rights or wrongs there. I wish I had given myself this permission earlier on to relax into the rhythm of what I know to be my truth, to see the miracle of each moment and my gratitude for it as prayer. And so, like the reverends I told you about a little bit earlier on, I find myself blessing the food each day, and my grandkids, my dear husband, and even the joy of a handy parking spot on High Street or a well-prepared meal at Louise's. After a visit with my Boston darling grandkids, I send them north, homeward to Boston, with a prayer, a wish for their safety. If there is an energy, a loving presence for me, it is not up here, out there somewhere, but rather one and the same with the love and intention of the sender, and that's me. Maybe this might be a good time to revisit prayer if you've laid it by the wayside, or maybe you're simply calling it by a different name. Finding a positive and comforting practice at this time in our lives, in this world that we now live in, is important. You might find it works differently than before, maybe even better this time round. And lastly, for me, prayer works because it changes me, the person who is praying, who in turn can make small changes in my own life. These prayers may or may not be answered, but the answering is more about aligning oneself with the further shore than ever believing it aligns itself to our will. If after any prayer you're a better person, then your prayer was answered. So may it be. Amen. And now we're going to have our next hymn. It's number 123, Spirit of Life. Our closing words this morning are by Rabbi Abraham Heschel. And he says, prayer invites God to be present in our spirits and in our lives. Prayer cannot bring water to parched land, nor mend a broken fence, nor rebuild a ruined city. But prayer can water an arid soul, can rebuild a weakened will, and mend a broken heart. Please join me as we extinguish the chalice. I know you know the words. We extinguish this flame, light of truth, the warmth of community, the power of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Lifted up, love bless your way. Light starlight, guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day. And the postlude. for those who know God.